Hello and thank you for joining us today. My name is Adam Thompson. Today's webinar is looking at Irish football and diversity within it and how that diversity has helped evolve football both domestically in Ireland and internationally. To discuss this, I'm going to be joined by former Ireland international Curtis Fleming, as well as the FAI Intercultural National Coordinator Des Tomlinson. Later on, I'm going to speak to Wexford youth star Vanessa Ogbonna as she talks about how the game actually helped her during her upbringing in Ireland and how it broke down barriers. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Firstly, guys, thank you very much for joining us here today. It's a very important topic that we're going to be speaking about. Curtis, if I could start off with yourself, can you just tell me about your first experiences with football in Ireland and kind of how you went from starting to kick a ball about when you was a youngster and going into the game all the way to the professional level and onto the international level?
That's a long story. That I tell you, I'm an old man, Adam. So I'll start off the grassroots, the basic stuff. I was brought up in Ballybock in the inner city, Dublin, and North Sider, proud North Side as it's come across. And the closest team, we had two teams near us, Stella Maris and Belvedere, and I kind of went up and had a trial here and had a trial there. I went to school in Fairview as well, so a few guys that played in the local teams were asking me to come up. I was the only black face around at that time in the area. Well, sorry, two black faces, and that was me and my brother. He was 2 years younger. So we loved football. We kicked the ball off the wall, on the road that we lived in Ballybock, and just loved it. Went to school, and that's where you kind of meet people, isn't it? The kind of same. Same loves as what football was for me. So, cut long story short, I ended up playing for Belvedere and going to Fairview. Went up to Stella for a little bit, but Belvedere was my home, and I ended up staying there for 10 years on and off, really. Not on and off, but 10 years from under 8s to under 18s, and I felt very comfortable there. I felt very welcomed. I think it's later on when you play against other teams that you kind of realise. I always tell the joke that I didn't know I was black till someone told me, because I didn't think I was anything different than anyone else. All the lads going to play a game of football, anyone to go in the shops, anyone playing in the matches, and I was okay. I was decent enough at the level, so I think sometimes I would be doing okay. I like to tackle, and there'd be a few racist comments then, but I think it was kind of one of those things that I feel, maybe because I wasn't educated and it was just part of the society then, a generation, was we just brushed it off. It hurt, but you kind of just got along with it, and lads say, it's all right, you be grand, and I love that now, because they're all telling me I'm going to be grand. They haven't had to put up with any of the abuse or the words that were called at me, and later on I think it had an effect on me, but I always had a great background and a great strength, a real core group who were strong, who'd stick up with me more than I'd probably stick up for myself, which was a wonderful thing. And when I look back now, I think I wouldn't have achieved or succeeded in a lot of things that I've done later in life without that group.
Growing up, you mentioned there that you was yourself and then one other blackface, which was your brother. Was there much diversity around in the game at all? Was there anybody you could kind of look up to? You spoke about the core of your friends who were there to support you, but was there anyone you could look and say, I'd like to be like him, he's a leading light,
Well, I think we would, if you're looking at the international teams as such. I did a Zoom a couple of days ago, and I've made Chris Hughton sound very, very old, but I think when I was looking at Ireland, and that was my country, Ireland's my country, that's where I'm from, that's where I love, I love Ireland, and I get quite angry when I hear of some of the incidents that happen in Ireland and some of the things that are said, especially to our international players, because for me, pulling on the green is one of the proudest days of my life, and it's something that I was brought up wanting to achieve. But I remember I played at full back, and I remember a little right back playing for Ireland with a load of hair, with that. And to achieve anything, I think you have to you have to be able to look up and see someone that mirrors yourself to know that it's achievable. And without even knowing it, I think he gave me that belief that I could go on and play because I'm looking at someone that looks like me, and if he can do it, I can do it. And I don't think there's enough role models, or there have been enough role models for us to follow.
And it is all about role models, isn't it? And Des, just to bring you into there, you would have been in touch with the game very much at the grassroots level. What are some of the things that are coming out from the grassroots level that kind of shows you that a lot of lessons have been learned from previous years, and the generation around Curtis's time coming into the game?
Yeah, I think if you use sort of international squads as an example of representation of grassroots, if you look at a lot of our underage international squads, you look at the diversity that is there in terms of people's parental backgrounds, and that starts from somewhere. It starts from the grassroots. So I think what has happened in Ireland, that clubs are more open to diversity. I mean, not every club, but more clubs that are in areas that are very diverse. A lot of our bigger cities, our urban areas, where they've got diversity in and around them, and the club has an open ethos. It says, look, we're about inclusion. So Chris just spoke about that you didn't realise you were black because in that club you were just Chris. Do you know what I mean? So, or Curtis, so you were just Curtis. So I think having an ethos of inclusion is something that we've seen more and more clubs take on, and open to diversity, open to difference, getting involved in their club. Mostly at the playing level. I think there's more work to be done in terms of getting more volunteers involved and coaches and so on. But certainly that open ethos is there.
They've got that ethos, but what are some of the practical things that they're bringing in? Is it a program? Is it, is it something like perhaps some of the languages? Whereas before, would we be able to assume that most people who were coming to the country would be English speaking first? That's certainly changed over the last decade and a half. Are those little things that people have been bringing in? So we've got bilingual people in the club.
Yeah, I wouldn't say clubs are doing that. I wouldn't say clubs are bilingual people. I think it's being open and reaching out. So certainly, if you look at some of the programs that we support clubs with, so we have an after-school program that's a club bridge program. So it leads into the club running an open day. So where clubs have come on board and say, look, we want to run an open day and encourage more kids that perhaps are not playing football from schools into our club, then I think that outreach has been something that has helped clubs to do that. So I don't think it's so much that clubs are putting in place every club's putting in place something that deals with language, but just being open and reaching out, I think is a big thing.
So targeting different communities that perhaps the ones have been looking at before, is that they're certainly one thing they're doing?
Yeah, I think if you look at Huntstown, Hartstown, not too far from where our offices are, and if you go to Tremor, you go to Galway, to a place called Jewishka, these are areas that are quite diverse. And I think there's a couple of choices for a club. If you're in an area that's quite diverse, you can just say, look, we'll just stay with what we're doing, or you can reach out. And I think those clubs do that, and they benefit from it.
Absolutely. We're talking about the benefits there. Certainly, we've seen the game across Europe, in particular, with more diversity, more different internationals coming to the game. Curtis, you've gone on and you've been coaching the game over in India, in Punjabi FC. Is the European football model they're looking to bring in, or is it something where they've got their own type of way that they're playing and they just want to establish it, or is that a case that they're looking for an outside input, if you know what I mean, to enhance their game?
Yeah, I think that's it, Adam. I think it's a huge country. It's a sleeping giant. There's 1.3 billion people. The country's the size of Europe. We were talking about a scouting system for Punjab, and people were going, in Dublin you'll pop down to Cork, or I'll pop here. We would think that was a long trip. Here it's 32 hours on a train. So it's an amazing place. Cricket is the biggest sport. There's no doubt about it. But football is gradually building and building. I think they had a 54% growth in fans watching the game last season, which in any other terms, you would probably say, yeah, but it's 54% of probably 100 million. Do you know what I mean? So it's an amazing growth of people. So there's no doubt that we're coming in. I think the biggest thing for me is, I think when it started, the ISL, which is the major Premier League in India, I coach in the I-League. They brought in Pirlo, they brought in Anelka, they brought in all these big stars to get it started, and it's died down now. They've realised that that's not the future. That you can bring players in, you can bring coaches in, but you need to have a foundation. And I think that we've come in, all the coaches now are coming in, and I'm thinking, okay, we're here to help. We're not here to tell you what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. We're saying, because this demographic of the whole country, there's 120 different languages. You know, it's amazing. I'll tell you a story. I was talking in front of 45 young boys, young lads, men. I'm talking about kids, they're probably 21, 22, but I'm an old man now, so it's so they are kids to me. But I'm talking, and all the coaches are around, and I'm speaking, and I'm telling them that we're going to be open. I want it to be. It's a very, very submissive kind of way the players are. Everything is yes sir, no, yes sir, yes, I will run left, afraid to do things out of the way because they think that someone might shout at them and that. So I'm trying to get them to be inventive, to be open. No pass is a mistake. So I'm talking, and I'm thinking to myself, and I'm not an overconfident guy. I'm going, this is going quite well. Inside I'm thinking, happy days, here we go, this is brilliant. So I finish and I go, great. And they're all, great, sir, great. And I said to the coach who was with me, I said, I thought that went well. And, I hope. He said, well, coach, sorry. He said 70% of them won't even know what you said. Do you know what I mean? Because we were from the north. And he kind of burst my bubble very quickly. So it's a learning curve all the time when you're out there. But the biggest thing is the humility and the desperate need for them to do well. A lot of them come from really impoverished backgrounds, and they're just so desperate to do well, they'll do anything. There's no agents, there's no big cash, there's no tattoos, there's no, they're just like literally there, and they want to improve the game. And I think if they can encompass all of that in with the right coaching and getting a structure in, you would be shocked with the structure. We look at structure in Ireland and England and around Europe. It's in place for a lot of years. There's no structure in India for football as such. So you're literally starting from the grassroots, trying to get grounds right, to play on good surfaces so the kids can practice their skills. And then even just getting that and the right balls, going then to build up and build up. My club isn't like that. We have, we've got a real good structure, and the club have put money into it. But it's a sleeping giant. But at the moment, we're coming in, we're trying to embed a foundation and kind of a pathway to what professionalism could be or should be.
And just on that diversity point, because I think how many different nationalities did you, or different cultures did you say?
Oh, well, there's 110 different, 120 different languages, from around the country. So it's like literally, I've got one lad who has a little bit of English who can understand another guy from another part of the city. So I'm talking to him to talk to him, and then I don't know. But we were talking about going into clubs and inclusion, okay? And I think there's nothing better, is there, to walk up and see someone smiling and throwing you a ball. If you're a kid, you talk about inclusion. You don't have to go and hug anybody. You don't have to go and be a big marching band. You can just say, come on, grab a ball, let's go. Here we go, because we've all done it as kids, 20, 30-year-olds. And if the kid goes home and says, wow, I'm having a brilliant time, Mum, that was unbelievable, why don't you come and have a look? And that's the thing, Des, I think that sometimes we can write big policies and we can do this and we can do that, but sometimes, and I know it's a basic thought, but sometimes isn't it a friendly face? Friendly face.
Without a doubt, and I think I was talking to one of our development officers, and he was talking about late night leagues, which is done sometimes through clubs. It's run late at night, and it gives kids that aren't necessarily involved in a club an opportunity to play football, and from different backgrounds. So he was talking about just the opportunity that football gave for social interaction. So you had kids that were from an indigenous traveller background, you had kids that had different family heritage playing football. And it gave them the opportunity to interact and build up relationships. Now there was some challenges around it, but it gave them that opportunity, and out of it, people built up really good connections. I think without a doubt, I think you can bring that diversity together through football, and that's the benefit of football. And if you have someone that is motivated and a champion, and like you say, puts the ball down and is welcoming, that makes a massive difference.
Yeah, and Adam was saying, sorry, Adam, just you were talking about inclusion in teams. I played in a team in Middlesbrough. We had a Brazilian, we had a Croatian, we had an Italian, we had a German player, Irish, Scottish, Welsh. You know, and that's why I think football is a brilliant vehicle, because you're getting all these different nationalities, beliefs, religions working together to achieve something. There was nothing getting in the way. I wasn't thinking I don't want to play with a Croatian guy. I don't want to play with a South American guy. I don't want to. I think it's one of them things that probably because we love it, we love the game, and we're passionate about it. We know what it can bring. We think it can cure everything, but I think it makes a huge difference to be able to be involved in it.
It's interesting. I was going to go on to your Middlesbrough days. Particularly that part of the northeast in Middlesbrough. It wouldn't have as many players. Not many players would be looking to flock from Brazil to Middlesbrough as perhaps if it was a London club. And that was the whole thing, wasn't it? And I always remember that day. When these signings came, and what an exciting buzz it must have been for the area. But you were there right at the time that you. Players from South America, and you've got this absolute genius in Fabrizio Ravanelli, coming to the Riverside. What was that like as well? How important was it to get all those cultures? We've heard people talk about Di Canio changed his diet and the eating, and Arsene Wenger changed the fitness. What did those guys and their cultures bring to Middlesbrough at that time?
Well, I think they brought a razzmatazz as such. I think Middlesbrough ended up being, I played for Middlesbrough for 10 years. I started off at the old ground of Erson Park, and we didn't have any foreign players as such. We were all, Irish, English, Scottish-based players. Clayton Blackmore was there, Welsh. Do you know what I mean? And that's probably as, as diverse as it got. But in the change, the biggest thing was we had a manager, Brian Robson, who was very, very old. We brought an assistant manager, Viv Anderson, the first black player to play for England. So straight away, you've got a diversity in there without even thinking about it. We didn't think that Viv was black. We didn't think that Brian Robson was white. They were just two superstar players that had played, that I looked up to, and who were fantastic. So that kind of brought in that kind of relaxed tone. You never heard anything. There's no underlying feeling of any of the hierarchy of the club, and I think that was huge. But to bring them into Middlesbrough is a real, I wouldn't say it's predominantly white, but there's a huge Asian community in the centre of Middlesbrough. And even over the last 15 or 20 years that I've been here, it's really changed. The diversity has changed. There's been a lot of asylum seekers being put up into the northeast of England. Which there's been a lot of problems up here about it. And again, we've used football. I've been involved in a football tournament with a charity that I'm a patron of called Justice First, which helps asylum seekers. In fact, my wife works at the charity. And the countries now, we have a tournament, and it's like literally we've got a Somalian team, an Afghanistani team, a Kurdistan team. We've got teams that you would never even think would be in the northeast of England. So I really think, getting back to your answer to your question, Adam, is that bringing Emerson in, really black guy, this gelled hair, everything. But when he walked in, you didn't think, no one thought in the northeast he was black. Ravanelli came, we didn't think he was Italian, he's just a really good player. And I think what that did is it opened up the door for people to talk to different colours and different nationalities, because you kind of had something to break the ice with. It's something like, there's a Brazilian, there's an Italian guy, do you know what I mean? We had Alan Boksic came from Croatia, again, a different guy, a different mentality. We were lucky enough, Andy Townsend came again, a great champion of the cause as well. So I think that it opened up a lot of people's eyes. It opened up a lot of people's eyes to the northeast as well. But I always liked the northeast because it was similar to Dublin for me. working class, honest people, you know, wanted to enjoy the football and maybe go for a pint after it, and that's what it is. There was no real razzmatazz or executive boxes about it, and that's what I loved about it. And it hurts me sometimes when something happens in the Northeast or something happens in Dublin to do it. Racism and attacks, or you know, marches, you know, from right wing kind of groups to do that. I think Dublin now, because I'm Irish, we've populated the world. We've populated the world. So we've dug a road in every country in the world. How can we stop people coming in to try and make a living, an honest living, and make it, you know, and bring their families up in a wonderful country, which you know, which as I say to you, I'm the biggest fan.
Do you think that football is perhaps leading the way in some compared to other industries, where you mentioned there that when Emerson came in, people didn't look at a black guy. When Ravanelli came in, people weren't looking at an Italian guy. They just looked at them as these guys are quality. They're good at their jobs and they're here to help us. Do you think that's where other industries could be learn from football in that aspect, that when somebody comes into the job, you're not looking at their race, you're not looking at their background, you're actually, somebody here is going to bring quality?
There's no doubt. Sorry, Des, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think it's like a really interesting question, Adam, because I think when you think about where do people get an opportunity to interact in life. Okay, you go to work, you have to interact. If you go to school, you have to interact. And outside of that, maybe there's not that many opportunities. I think football really provides a real forum for that interaction. I think football does lead the way to a large extent in terms of when you look at football, just visibly, like a picture paints 1,000 words. Everyone's kind of heard that. When you look at it, you can see that diversity there in front of you. So I think it's leading the way in that regard. And also the messages that we have around trying to make sure that we challenge threats to the integrity of the game and threats to people's dignity. Football's leading the way in that because it's putting out these messages. There's always more to be done. But just a quick kind of story. Recently I was told about, it was actually to do with the Vienna Orchestra. The Vienna Orchestra was, they had a recruitment campaign. They were trying to recruit, and the orchestra didn't have many females in it because there was a sense about females couldn't play the same as males. So they did this experiment essentially around recruitment, where basically it was a blind recruitment. So what they did is that they had people come in and you didn't know anything about them, if they're a male or a female. They just played and you just listen. The people that were making the selection just listen to the music, and they actually asked the women actually when they were coming in to take their heels off, so you didn't hear the sound of the heels. So the point I'm making is that I think, you know, when you have a situation whereby you're open to diversity, I think that's really, really important. And football provides that opportunity for that openness to diversity. Sometimes you have to make some small efforts to try and remove some of the biases that might be in society and that might be impacting football. We have to make an effort in that regard. But yeah, I think football, I would say football's leading the way. There's more always to be done. I don't know what you think, Curtis.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Des. I think it's really led the way. You know, I worked for Show Races and Red Card, and when I had chances, I went into the schools, did Q&A, and then we did a little bit of coaching, and we met the kids. And I always feel very lucky. I had the experiences of growing up in Dublin. I tell the story because it's stuck with me. I was walking from Ballybuck to Summerhill and Sean McDermott Street, where the swimming baths were. And we're all walking along, and as you go over the bridge, you look up to your right, and Croke Park is there. So it's the canal, and just as you go over, and I always remembered it. And as I'm walking down, this big man has come along, just remembering me at a hat and a big horrible face. And as I've walked up to him, I can't even remember if I'm 10 or 12 or whatever. As I'm walking, he went, "You black this, go back to your own country." And I remember him, and I can still sense it, and I can still feel it. You know, people say, you know, sticks and stones and all that. For me, that's a load of, it doesn't ring true for me, because I can remember the hurt. I can remember that feeling of this big, huge, older man making this threat really at me. And then it's just continuing, the lads, I don't mind it and go on. I can remember that now. That was 40 years ago. I can remember that. So what we're doing is I'm looking at these kids and I go into the kids, into the schools, and I talk to these children about my experiences. I'm not afraid to say I was afraid. I'm not to say that it hurt, because I'm sharing experience. And if I can affect and it can help somebody, just one kid in the room, to open up about it, whatever nationality or religion you are or whatever colour you are, I think I've done a fantastic job, because I'm just helping. I'm not going to save the world. I want to help that guy. And I think that football, that they're giving us that platform where I can walk into a room. And when I walk into a room, and especially in the Northeast here, I'm Curtis Fleming, the footballer. I'm not the black Irish fella walking in. And I'm not saying that would stop me getting in the door, but being a professional footballer has helped me to get through some of those doors and to spread my message and to talk to people. And I think football has been huge. Every day we read something else that's happening in football in Ireland, and probably the things that we don't hear is probably the most scary, that we don't hear in the grassroots des. What we don't hear, at the lower league clubs, or, the under 15s in Tremor or something that's happened. So it's kind of one of them that you got to keep battling and fighting, and it shocks you to the core. But what do? Do we step back? No, we take it head on, because we know it's not right. And I think the Black Lives Matter campaign at the starting, especially here in the Northeast, a lot of people have jumped on it. It's really affected them in a way that I didn't think I would see for a lot of years. And I think that's right down to the younger kids who now are maybe it was the lockdown, maybe they were in-house, maybe they hadn't got a chance to go out and do whatever they were doing, that they had a chance to kind of look and say that's wrong, and then kind of investigate why it was wrong. But the sea change for me has been huge over the last year or so, and then long may it continue.
And it's a subject, as we say, which is very much in the news, and it's very much predominant. And it seems to. I think there was a big fear, wasn't there, that after the murder of George Floyd in May, that perhaps this would be a couple of weeks and go away. But here we are, towards the last quarter of the year. It's very much prevalent. We're seeing, just LeBron James last week continuing that message and what's going on. You talked about there, Curtis, about how, in Ireland we have seen marches, or in Ireland, we should be. We've as you said, we've been open to the world. We've travelled to the world. What would you like to see more happening in Ireland? From a football point of view, where we've said, I think we've agreed that football has led the way to an extent. But what more can football do to perhaps get that message across to people that, look, this isn't the way. You can't be doing that. You can't be that guy who was approaching you near Croke Park and saying those things. How can we learn from that?
I think, again, Des, do you want to say anything on that, and I'll come in, or do you want me to?
You can start, Curtis.
Yeah. Sorry, Adam. Yes. I think, inclusion, that Des said earlier. I think inclusion is an acceptance, and I think acceptance is education. And I think an acceptance of anybody is education, because then you can accept what their beliefs are. That not everyone is an individual. Every person is an individual. We're all, different shapes, sizes, colours. So I think it's an education thing for me, and I think that can come through the clubs and with the clubs. Football has changed a lot of people's lives, I think, in Ireland, and it has in England, because of the inclusion of coming in and meeting people that you probably wouldn't meet at any other time. I think football as well gives you a cross-section of society. I think you can be at a football game and you can have a high court judge, and you can have a painted and decorated guy. My uncles were all painted and decorated, not sitting too far away from each other, and supporting the same cause. And doesn't matter what colour you are, when you score, do we all jump together? When you if you win, that celebration that comes, that you look around, you end up hugging someone and you don't even know them. Do you know what I mean? And it's that belief, that football, and that kind of religion of football, and that gives you that kind of feeling. And then what happens was, when you walk out of the ground, does that stop? Should that stop? And I think what it does is it gives We played in a stadium of 34,000 people, you know, full every week when we were playing, 34 every week. So every week there's that interaction, people coming. There was Brazilian fans coming over just to see Juninho. Do you know what I mean? There was fans coming from Ireland, from England, from Germany, just to see all these guys playing. And I think that gave you a chance that maybe they bumped into each other or they sat. And then on the grassroots level, I think, as we said, inclusion is the biggest thing. We have to keep putting our arm out there in the community. We can't keep saying. People said to me, in the Northeast, there's not too many Asian players, Indian players, you know, because they've got a different mindset and they're talking more about education and football and sports. But they all want to be cricketers. So hold on, is that not sport? You know what I mean? And then you've got 3, 4, 5 generations of Indian families living in the Northeast. And I meet a lot of them and, oh, Curtis, the Borough, we're big fans and stuff like that, you know. So again, are we open enough to them? And I have to keep putting the arms out. We can't just keep saying that, no, you didn't want to come in or wherever. Life changes every day. And I think in Ireland, especially for us, especially because of the sort of people that we are, look back at what we are. Look at our backgrounds. What are we all about? You know, when you think about the Irish, you think good fun. You think about the Irish dancing, you think about it tough, you think about the Irish sports. That's a huge it's a backdrop of our lives, of what we are. And then people come in and we shut down about that. Why should we be worried? We should say, come and celebrate with us. And please be part of it. Because I know in 10 or 15 years' times, Vanessa Ogbonna is her name. 10 years ago, we would have all thought it'd be Murphy, O'Shaughnessy, you know, that Pádraig O'Shaughnessy, that was it and stuff like that. People better get used to it, because the names are all going to be different in the next 10 or 15 years. But please don't tell me that's going to dilute anything about walking out and wearing the green on the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Doesn't matter. Once you wear that green, that doesn't matter. You know, your name, your colour, where you're from. If you want to play for your country and you walk out, does it really matter? Do you know what I mean? And that's my biggest argument. That's my biggest kind of drive.
Yeah. And Des, you know, we would have seen certainly in the last 15 years a lot of change in the diversity that's involved in Ireland. You've been involved in a lot of that. What are some of the benefits that we're seeing at the grassroots level? What are some of the messages coming from clubs about how having more diversity, having people from different cultures, how it's able to enhance the game here, but also enhance the clubs?
Yeah, I think what you're seeing is, you know, if we look at clubs have more players. Clubs want more players involved in their clubs, and that's happening. That they're seeing players getting involved, and I think if when kids are getting involved and they're coming, say, or even not just kids, but I give an example of a club that's in Gort, which is kind of on the border of Galway and County Clare. They're called Gort United. Now they're all actually Brazilians. A lot of them have lived in that area for 15 years, and a lot of them are relatively new. And they're an adult team. So when they go and they play a team in the Galway League, they bring a different feeling to how they play. So that's a challenge for them, because they're coming up against a certain style, and it's a challenge for people playing against them. So I think coming in and bringing in that different perspective, I think, is important. I think from a club's perspective, having more kids participate, getting involved, that just brings more opportunities for the club. And I think, generally speaking, in terms of society, there's more opportunities for interaction. There's more opportunities for people to break down barriers by actually engaging and interacting with diversity. And I think the point that Curtis made just around education, that's just so important. And I think you can have formal education and you can have informal education through just interacting with people and breaking down maybe some of the stereotypes and ideas that people have. And I think when you think about where Ireland will be not that long from now, because if you look at a lot of the underage squads and you look at some of the players that are coming through into the senior squads, that when they go and they do a post-match and they've scored the winner for Ireland, they're not going to talk like me. They won't have this accent. They'll have an accent from Cork or an accent from Dublin, and that will tell a story about what it means to be Irish, that it's much more wider than just one thing. So you can be a Nigerian Irish, you can be Polish Irish, you can actually even be English Irish perhaps. So it kind of sends a really strong message. But in terms of grassroots, I think just having more diversity there brings more opportunities for clubs in terms of having more players, and I think it has an impact. I think also on playing style, because people are coming with their own sense of how football should be played and bringing that into a league or bringing that into a club.
Yeah, and I think if we're talking about that example there, fantastic example recently of Adam Eder breaking into the first team, unbelievable record he's had, and very much Cork born and bred. You know what I mean? So that's a great example there. Sort of touching on the final topic, really, Curtis. What when you talk about when you started in the game, what have you seen perhaps from your time playing in England, your time playing in Ireland, and coaching out in India? What structures have you seen that you would like to see introduced in Ireland, or do you think Ireland could benefit from?
Again, you know, I think the coach education, especially from the football, I think is huge. And again, I think if you're going to be educated, you have to believe that there may be a job at the end of it, and you're doing the education for a reason. You're not just ticking a box. And then again, I think you got to look at the coaching, the coaches who are coaching at the top level in the country and in the international teams. That again, is it achievable? If you're Irish, Polish, do you think you can get there? If you're Irish, Nigerian, do you think you can get there? You know, and I think that's the biggest thing is it's getting people onto the ladder of football, of getting the badges, getting involved in it. It's been huge. It's still the battle in England at the moment, and it's still very, very raw at the moment. And there's been a lot of meetings. There's been a lot of meetings, especially with the EFL, talking about the Rooney Rule. And the Rooney Rule, you know, I was at a discussion about the Rooney Rule, and the thing is, I had to really put the point across was they're saying that they want to get a black candidate, not just black, you know, black Asian, you know, minority ethnic, but just the BAME. It's easier to say, but what I'm saying is that it's kind of it's not about letting you in the door. It's not about just saying you a chance to walk in the door, but the biggest thing for me is if you're walking through the door, you better be prepared. I don't want to tell a coach in England or in Ireland that you can't get a job because of the colour of your skin. I would hope it's the lack of education that stops you, or something that just doesn't fit right. So when I go, I'm a pro license holder that I did in the FAI. I've coached for 16 years from under 13s to 14 to senior play. I coached Adama Traore, you know, last year, Wilfred Zaha a few years ago, quality players. So we know we can deal with them. So that's it. I've played at a decent level. I've played from Belvedere to League of Ireland to non-league to Premier League to international football. So when I walk through the door, I'm not as such worried. I know that I've done my time, and that's what I'm saying to the black coaches. We need to be educated when we go through the door. We can't expect to just get in the door as a free pass. When you go through that door, you really want to make a difference, and you want to get that job. Not because of the colour of your skin, because you think you're the best coach.
Yeah.
Do I want to manage Ireland? Of course I want to manage Ireland. Who wouldn't want to be? I wanted to play for Ireland. Do you know what I mean? I wanted to play for Ireland. Of course I want to be involved in the coaching structure in the FAI. There's no doubt about that, and there's a lot of people. So I just think there has to be a real openness. It can't be a closed shop. The English FA are struggling with that at the moment because people think it's a closed shop. And the FAI can't go down that same route, that it's got to be open for everybody. The best man gets the job. The best person gets the job. But when they walk in for that interview, they know that they're on a level playing field. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing, especially for the structure of football in Ireland, because I think that if it's like we spoke, a very famous international English international was talking at the meeting that I was on. And I won't say his name, but what he was going on. And all I heard was negativity. All I heard was there's no jobs for black coaches. There's none of this. Not going to get a chance, not to get it. And I'm thinking, if I'm a young black coach sat behind him, I'm thinking, I might as well take up, I don't know, cricket or something, because I've got no chance here to be involved in it. And I'm thinking, what's that mantra? That mantra's negative. What they should have been saying is make sure we break that glass ceiling, that we try our best, that we're working together, make sure we're educated, make sure we're this, make sure we're that. And I think it's the same in Ireland, because you're gonna maybe miss the next, as a player, the next Ida. You're going to miss the next Paul McGrath. You're going to, because they won't be afraid. They'll be afraid to go to the club. They'll be afraid to walk through that gate. You know, the next famous black manager. We don't know who's going to bring us to a World Cup. He could be sat, you know, probably a few miles from you, Des, and he's afraid. He loves coaching. He studies everything. He analyses everything. He's unbelievable, but he just doesn't know where to go with it. And I think it's a waste. It's a waste, because at the end of the day, everything is going to be positive for us rather than a negative.
And I think it's 100%. And I think as a person working as a football development professional, you know, we need to look at that and say, okay, right, if we look at grassroots, and if we look at, if we use, say, senior squad, and we use some of our underage squads as an example of how players have come through, there's a recognition that at grassroots kids are getting involved, they're coming through the emerging talent system, and they're getting to the top level of the game. But if you were to ask me that same question for coaches, we can't point to that. So that's something as someone working as a sports development professional, we now need to look at that, and we now to say, well, yeah, what is the next big piece of work that we need to do? And that piece of work is around, okay, do we get more volunteers in at grassroots, and then how do we get more people coming up through the system, as you say, so that when people do walk into that level playing field situation, they have the qualifications, and then it is just a case of making a decision about, like, you know, what you see in front of you in terms of qualifications and experience and things like that. So yeah, I'd agree with that 100%.
The thing as well, Des, is if you think about it, I don't mind if I don't get a job, because I am me. I've done all the work that I can do, and I can go in. But if I don't get the job, please tell me. Give me positive feedback, or give me any negativity. Give me feedback, so then I can go away and work on that. I don't want to think it's for anything else. And sometimes when you don't get the job and you don't have feedback, you will read things into it. Please tell me why you haven't got it. And the transparency then will give you a belief to go again for your next job.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's a huge thing.
Yeah, without a doubt. If we as a three were sat here, as a four were sat here in, you know, 10 years from now, then, you know, I'd like to be able to look back and say, well, yeah, from the grassroots up, we've got more people coming through, we've got more people that are educated as coaches, more volunteers, and then that's moved up to the top levels. I think that's certainly a target to the future.
I think there's always targets, isn't there, when it comes to this? Des, Curtis, I thank you so much for having this conversation. It's been very, very insightful. Been great to get your input to it, and no doubt, I'm sure we could have sat here for hours and hours talking about something. But I appreciate your time.
No problem. Thanks very much. Great to see you, Des. Thanks, fantastic. Enjoyed that. Thank you.
So I'm delighted to be joined by Wexford youth star Vanessa Ogbonna. Vanessa, thank you so much for joining us today.
Not a problem, Adam.
I want to start off by talking about how it all started for you. What were your first memories of playing football? Where did you start out? If you could just go ahead with that.
Yeah, my first ever memory, I think it's the first time I actually was part of like a team setting, would have been like there was an academy football, like training in the mornings, and my brother was going down to that. My dad was walking him down, and like we started athletics just a couple of weeks before, in Tramore as well. So I kind of like, he was like my best friend at the time. I was like 7 or 6. So I wanted to follow along as well. So walked down to the training now, and then the pitch is split up in 4. So obviously different age groups and stuff. But then one of the just all girls, and like I'd say 99.9% of the girls that were there were girls that had already either been in my primary school class or were part of the athletics team that I was running with. Like I just started a couple weeks prior to that, and they all saw me and they just like kind of like asked me, and like I don't remember what I was wearing. I don't think I had like football boots on or whatever. I just wanted to join in, and like I was really energetic, so I was just running all over the place thinking that I was like really good. But like I literally lasted like 10 minutes, and like the whole session was like an hour. So it's like after that, one of the coaches, Stuart, just approached my dad and was just like, yeah, if you're ever bringing like my brother down, Emmanuel, just bring her down as well. So I started off that way. But I usually had like Irish dancing You would never picture me as an Irish dancer, but I started Irish dancing as well. So I probably only moved to Waterford probably a couple of months, and we're involved in Irish dancing as well. But that was on Saturdays as well. So after a couple of weeks, I would go to football with my brother and then walk to Irish dancing with my dad. So my calves were just so sore, like, and I was just like, this is just rubbish. And I just didn't fit in the Irish dancing setting at all. So I was just like, quit that, start soccer, because there's just a bunch of people from my class and athletics team that were there as well. So that's kind of where it all started in Shamor.
That's fantastic that it came down to football or Irish dancing, and you went down the football route. I was actually going to ask, actually, was it a case of how did it look? Was it? I wasn't sure if you was playing out and about outside the house in the street, you know, if there was more boys and girls. But it seems like you went down with your brother. There were, you know, a bunch of people, a bunch of kids from your class that you recognised, and they were willing. They were like,
they were the one who called me in. Yeah, exactly. But like I was already playing like on the street and stuff, but like that was a bit different. So like that came a bit with playing with the girls. So because I played on the team, the lads were more likely to let me join in. And then like obviously like we literally are only like 7. So as we grew up, then I just followed my brother around. But at the time when I actually went down, we were living in direct provision at the time. Bunch of kids all together playing together, so it was more that setting than like a state and people playing on the roads type setting.
It's interesting you say that. I mean, you know, a lot of people when they think diversity, it also it immediately comes a race or a background issue. But you mentioned there that because the boys had seen you playing football, they were more open to you joining them too. That's an interesting thing as well. I mean, was that where more competitive level came out of you, where you were like, I want to show the boys what I can do, or was it just at that time very much the innocence of just having fun?
I've always been a tomboy anyway, and like I said, like my brother was my close friend, so like I was quite, even at the time I was bigger than my brother, so I kind of grew a bit old a bit earlier. So I think like my physical presence definitely did help. And I'm not gonna lie, I think I was a pretty scary kid. I'm not actually gonna lie. So being able to like keep up, because that was the thing. I think boys, when it comes to football, take it really seriously. So if there's girls that can't keep up, or if they have to like always compensate for you, like you're not going to join in. So as I grew older, I just stopped playing with guys because I didn't want to die. But when I was younger, I was on a better level with them because we were all kind of in and around the same height and stuff.
So would you say then, you know, that the football, you already had that link with Irish dancing, so it's very much like you came in and you were like very much brought up with the traditional Irish culture. Do you think that football helped that a lot more, helped to break few more barriers down for you?
Oh yeah, football and athletics, because I only stopped athletics the year I went to college. Like just sport in general definitely broke every barrier for me. Like every positive impact in my life that pretty much started from football, like with regards to like coaches, like reaching out to my family. Like there's still coaches that even athletics coach, that we would still go to their houses on Christmas, stuff like that, who they would come to our house and stuff like that, and helping to integrate into the culture a lot better. Because at that age, like I started first class here in Ireland, so everyone is new in first class. So everyone's on the same playing field. So as a child, you don't learn all the differences. Everyone, it's just who do I get on with and who's fun and who's not annoying. Like, do you know what I mean? So it was like, I think I came in at the perfect time to break a lot, to not even experience a lot of these barriers. Because I think once you get older, you kind of have like, that's when you start having like, what's the word, prejudice about people and different type of thoughts. But at that age, I think I kind of slipped in under the radar before you kind of understand that there are different people in the world. But then as I grew up, football gave my family, not even me, the chance to like integrate into the community. So like a lot of people would know my family in Chamor, like just because of like the impact that me, my brother, and my sister would have had in like football and athletics. And then obviously going to school competitions as well. You get to meet other parents where it's like, once again, bringing it back to living in direct provision, your family is secluded away from the regular community. So if you're just a minority and stuff and you don't know where to start as an adult. You just stick to what you know. So because me and my brother were forcing my parents to integrate with other people, it wasn't really all active thinking, obviously, but it was all subliminal. So because we're in different places, they get to experience other people, and you get to break a lot of barriers without having to actively try to break them down.
Does this kind of show you just how important it is to have, certainly at a younger level, be open to a lot more children, which is, and sport, you mentioned there, sport, football and athletics, it also helped your family integrate, your parents integrate, because they were then out and about, and they were, integrating with other parents, understanding little things. Does that just go to show you the power of sport, just to do that, even from a very young age for you?
100%, like definitely. I think there's a lot of things that we don't realize in sport, because at the end of the day, a lot of like pride a lot of the time wins in sport. You want to be the best, and sometimes you may be a racist or you may not like a certain type of person, but if they're the best person on your team, you're kind of like how am I going to deal with this? Do you know what I mean? And obviously some people don't care and would rather lose, but a lot of the times you get to understand people on a common level, and that's how you build friendships. Just when you have something familiar with someone, then you start to ask them about everything else in their life. But if you don't see someone as common to you, if you don't see that you have any sort of connection with this person, even just in general, it's very hard to just start up a friendship if you don't know what's common. So if you meet someone down the road, you start talking about football, next thing you know, they might live in the same place as you, they might do different things, and it just opens up a new world once you have a common ground with people.
And you mentioned there that you talk about common ground. You went on to college in the USA and went and played out in the USA. I want to kind of move the conversation on there, sort of talking about the influence of different cultures to the game. In the USA, was it very much that they had their own style that they wanted to implement, or was it something where they were looking to Europe and saying, we want to bring in more of a European style? Were they open to listening to different ideas, or was it very regimented to say, no, we have a very successful way of doing things, you've to integrate into how we play the game?
I think that depends on the coach you have. So a lot of the American coaches are very much on the American style of playing, which is a lot of running, not a lot of tactics, where it's just very fast-paced football. It's going back and forth. A lot of the coaches who are not American or American immigrants would look to the more European style of football, because that's what a lot of them would have grown up on, even people in South America. So I had the pleasure of being so my first coach was Mag Soren and Claire Scanlon. So they would have both played international for Ireland anyway. So I had the opportunity to see kind of both sides of that, where they tried to implement like the European side of things, but it was quite hard because a lot of the girls were American, so they grew up in that system, and it's almost kind of brainwashing. So I had I'm I said, I'm a very outgoing person, so I had a lot of just friction with some of the girls, because it's over here you learn to play football a lot more freely. Over there, it's what the coach says. It's very rigid. So it's we'd be playing a drill, and it would be okay, players on the outside, and you can't come into the square. But the ball would literally roll and be 2 yards outside the line, and they would just look at it. And I'm you can just come in. They're no, we're not allowed. But it's over here, you'd almost have people not listening to that rule at all. It's almost just if I'm here and the ball comes to me, what am I going to do? So I think it depends on the type of coach you had. And then my second coach was South American, so he's from Argentina. So he's going to play Barcelona football, so tiki-taka, everything on the ground. But a lot of the teams we played would have been just straight direct football, and it was just more about fitness than it was about tactics.
It's interesting to say that. So you very much a regimented way of how things were done. You then come back to Ireland, and you're playing in Ireland. What did you bring? What lessons did you learn in the States what did you add to your game when you come back to Ireland? Were there much that you were able to bring, and were any of your teammates able to benefit from that?
Personally, I would have said what I would have learned out of my 3 years in America was definitely resilience on a personal level, because I had an ACL tear over there and I had a lot of things that went on. So a lot of it would have been like mentally off the field. So that's what I've been able to bring. And it would definitely be the more positive side of things. I think in America, they're a bit corny with things, like, and it's just like everything is praised a lot of the time. But I think the opposite sometimes in Irish football, where it's kind of like, if you're not doing this to a certain level, it's not good. So it's kind of like bringing that positivity into the team. I think that's probably the biggest thing that I would have brought last year off the pitch. And on the pitch then, I think I'm pretty much the same player as I was when I was younger. I'm just a bit fitter. So like just a lot more just stronger and being able to run. That's pretty much it. And just having the ability to run channels and stuff like that, and giving that option as opposed to always coming feet. Where that would be like the girls that I would be playing with up top, they most likely would be looking to come in more, where I would be looking to run more. So I think that's probably where America would have influenced me and my teammates the most.
So would you say that in Ireland we're much more open to other ways, other styles, other influences from other cultures to perhaps what you experienced in America? And is that something which you feel potentially could benefit, or do you feel like, Ireland should be establishing its own? What would you think? Do you think we should be listening to more cultures, or how do you feel that should be?
I think Ireland is really accepting of other cultures. Like even just playing under Tom, I think we've tried everything under the sun. And personally, I like that because like I said, I watched football growing up, so I don't like a rigid style of football. Like I like somewhat free flowing. I like messing around with tactics, actually understanding what we're doing as opposed to being told this is what you're doing and that's that. With regards to the more on a bigger scale, I think it's harder to succeed when you have a lot of things going on. But at the end of the day, when it does click, it will. And I think that's kind of the benefit of Irish football being somewhat underdeveloped. You have the option of trying different things. You have the option of having different people, as opposed to, like, let's say, the likes of Germany, and like they're just very defensive minded. Like if you're a child growing up in that and you don't want to play that way, you might not make that team just because you don't fit this style. Doesn't mean that you're a bad player. It just means that you don't fit this system. And I think diversity is a great thing in every institution. And I think for Ireland, it benefits us that we are very diverse in the way we do things and what we allow, because it's good to change and like it's all for football isn't always great, especially when it's not fully developed. If you're sticking to something that's not working all the time, like it's good to have the confidence to try something else.
We're seeing ever more throughout the Irish international, a lot more players from a black background, representing, whether it be black Nigeria, black Caribbean, who have come in and representing the team. Most recently at senior level, Adam Eder representing the men's seniors, and we have Rihanna Jarrett as well there. When you see this, do you get a kind of more hope? Does that how do you feel when you see a black person or someone you're more you can relate to from your background representing your country?
Yeah, I think I say this like every time I speak to anyone, like representation matters. I personally think like they're doing great, but I don't think that the Irish team, women aside, because there's not as much like non-white females, but the men's team anyway, I don't think it's anywhere representative of the diversity in Ireland. I think they're doing a great job, like just scouting more non-white Irish people in there. But I think for white boys or for black boys, I think it's very hard to look at that and you see your team and you see like I know a bunch of teams at grassroots, regional level, like even underage. Like I would look more to the underage boys teams than I would to the national team, because like the boys down there are killing it. But for some reason, there's a disconnect between when you're underage and when you're senior, and I don't know what that is. But you see a lot more like black kids thriving when they're younger, and then for something there's just a disconnect, whether it's on the side of the individual or it's on the side of the institution, but there's just for some reason, they're not being scouted at that level, or they're dropping under the radar, or they're going elsewhere. So as a black footballer, I would obviously like to see more if they're obviously capable to be there. Like when one black person makes it, the whole black community is buzzing. Do you know what I mean? And it's stuff like this. And it's like when black kids were seeing him up there, like it's something that you look up to. Do you know what I mean? And it's not to say that there aren't black people or black Irish people who deserve to be at that level, but it's maybe there's a disconnect within the black community trying to get them up to that level, or whether the institution isn't looking for them. But a lot of questions need to be asked, because when you look at grassroots up to regional level, up to underage level, you're seeing a more diversity than you are with the national team. So a question needs to be asked: why, and what can be done?
I think the good thing that we do have in Ireland is, if you look as far back as Chris Hughton playing, when he was playing in the 70s, with someone there, and then we have the great Paul McGrath, and with players who've represented black players in perhaps a country which hasn't necessarily had as many black people or that diversity, certainly until probably about 15 years ago, when we've become a lot more of a diverse country. Going forward, looking at what you've learned as you're coming through, and you've mentioned there perhaps some of the things that could be improved on, and I think that's part of the reason why the FAI is looking now, and it has been looking there, but certainly looking at ways it can always enhance itself. What would you have liked to have seen in place when you were younger and you were starting out in the game that you now, or what are some of the things that you're hearing taking place in grassroots that you think could be expanded on? This is the way to go.
I think that's a tough one. Because personally, I would say that my experience in Ireland has been immaculate. Like it's been great. I've had people who have gone over and beyond for me. But I'm the exception, not the rule. And I would like to see, first of all, I want to be a role model for other black girls, because I think, like I said, representation matters. It doesn't matter, if it's, and I hate using black and white all the time, but if it's white people being inclusive and including you in this, if you don't see other people like you in those places, it doesn't matter who's being nice to you or who wants you there. You're almost going to feel a bit eerie, is this, you don't know that you belong here as well. So personally, I would have liked to see more role models from my community, or just more diverse role models, and that's what I can do personally. And other people, I know Blessing and other girls and Rihanna are doing more, and definitely going more into the understanding, because it's weird, because it's a bit of a science or sociology. You need to understand where you're at, and I think every area in Ireland is very different. So my little town in Tramore did it very well, but what worked there might not work in inner city Dublin. And I think a lot of it is assessment. Ireland is still very young and understanding these things, but it's just the willingness to understand, and going into communities and just having people of diverse background as much as possible, as much as you have available, to go and speak to other younger kids, or go and be representing. It's like the 2020 thing. It's once you see someone like you there, you're more likely going to want to be there. And the other thing is more investment into the women's sport as a whole. So just even taken away from just diversity and inclusion, I think for girls to always want to go to America to have the level of football and education, I don't think that's good for the country. I think it's great that one or two, you're always going to have people who want to go over. But I think some people, when you grow up, you have to choose whether you want to play football or whether you want to go into education or be a regular girl. And I think that's why we see a lot of girls dropping between primary school into secondary school, and then even more between secondary school and into college. Because if you're going to put a lot of your time into this, you need to make sure that it's something that's developed. And the risk sometimes for girls is too large to make that decision, to make this everything that you do. There needs to be just more development in the girls' sports and more resources for girls to know that, yes, I can live my life here, but I can also focus on football. And it doesn't need to be so hard to focus on football. And there doesn't need to be all these stereotypes about girls that play football. It's anybody's sport, any type of girl, and can be part of that, as well as live a normal life outside of that as well.
Super stuff, Vanessa. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
My
It's been really
pleasure.
fascinating to hear you, your introduction into the game, and thank you so much.
Thank you.